Everyone, and welcome back into the Cornerstone Integrative Healing Podcast. I'm Kari, and here with my co-host Jen, and we have a special guest with us today, Leah Moritz. We're excited for her to just share more about what she's passionate about. We're going to learn about the FEMM method today. And Leah, do you want to just start with how you really, why you wanted to get into, I know you're a PA, right? Why you wanted to get into that, but then maybe how that changed over the last few years, and then we'll just kind of go from there. But I want the audience to kind of get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll dive into the main meat of today's episode.
Perfect. Yes. Well, thank you for having me on. Yes, I've been a physician assistant for 7 years now, and kind of just when I started college, I didn't even know what a PA was. It wasn't really a big field. It's kind of a funny small story, which what led me in to wanting to be a PA. But in college, I think my sophomore year, I had this like cold that turned into a sinus infection, and I just had all these symptoms. I felt pretty terrible for 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, this is going on too long. So I went to like my school like health center, and they were like, you definitely have a sinus infection. They gave me an antibiotic, and I took one dose, and I felt a million times better. Like my symptoms were almost completely gone. And so that to me was like, wow, like if I could, somebody helped me so much in this small way. And if I could, it just sparked that passion in me to want to help people in that same way.
Yeah.
So then coincidentally, by the time I was getting closer to graduation, my university actually opened their own PA program. So I ended up staying there and completing my PA degree right after graduation.
Mhm.
So then I was working as a PA in the emergency department for a couple of years. And then I transitioned to a private practice urgent care for a few years. And the more that I saw just kind of the health of the population and what we were doing to treat slash manage that, I found that there were a lot of issues. It just seemed like there were a lot of really sick people who all had a lot of things in common, such as obesity, smoking, heavy alcohol use, poor diet, all of these lifestyle factors. And our solution for that was here's all these pills to manage each individual condition. And it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense when there's these people are still suffering. They're still not in good health. And it didn't make a lot of sense when it seemed like we could just start at the root of this, change your lifestyle, you're going to feel a lot better. You're not going to need all these medications. And then when it came to women's health issues, whether it's fertility, or any sort of gynecological issue, in medicine, our solution was here's birth control. This
Yeah.
is going to cover up your symptoms. This is gonna make you feel better. And I knew that that was certainly not the answer. So, when I got married, I was introduced to natural family planning and fertility awareness methods. And through that, I learned so much about just the signs that a woman's body gives uh, about not only fertility, but hormone levels and just overall health. And so that was just another thing that clicked with me that look at all of these signs that we have to better understand our health. And in the medical field, we're completely ignoring all of that. So that's a little bit about my background and just what led me into medicine in the first place, and then just through my process of working in the field, what made me kind of change my mind about some things.
Yeah, goodness, it sounds familiar. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I know as a pharmacist, the field changed a lot whenever, from the time when I first kind of started working in the pharmacy until even when I graduated and starting working as a pharmacist. And yeah, I think a lot of people go into it with the right heart, wanting to serve people, but then they realize, oh, this might not be the best vehicle to do that, unfortunately. not that people don't need antibiotics and need different things. Like certainly if you have a sinus infection for 3 weeks, you might need an antibiotic, right? Just like you had a great help from that. But I just think there's so much more that we can do. And obviously we're really passionate about that here at Cornerstone for sure. And working alongside, sometimes they need conventional, but more so leaning into the lifestyle changes and natural means. But let's talk specifically about, you mentioned the main thing that they gave women if they were having trouble with their cycles was birth control. I don't, I think people hear maybe that's not the best choice, but maybe they don't understand why. Um, do you have something you'd like to maybe, I'm sure you have a lot of insight about that if you want to share, just so that people understand, yes, that is one way to go, but is it the best route that's really going to,
Right. Yeah,
give
yeah.
benefit?
So how birth control works, I'm talking about like a hormonal pill that you take every day, is it gives you low levels of hormones, so of estrogen, and this prevents a hormone in your brain called FSH um from wanting to release a follicle to eventually be ovulated. So it's enough hormone to make your body think that something's happening where you don't need that hormone to launch it into full-blown ovulation. So that's really how birth control works, is it keeps you from ovulating. And one thing that we talk about in FEMM specifically is that ovulation is a sign of health. We've often heard that like your menstrual cycle is another vital sign that you can use to monitor your health. And ovulation is a huge part of that, because a lot of times if you're having a lot of health issues in a variety of ways, your ovulation will be one of the first things to go often because your body's not going to prioritize reproduction when it's struggling in another way. So birth control will keep your body from ovulating. And the problem with that is then you're not getting that cyclical hormonal response that we're meant to in our cycle. So when we think about like starting at menstruation, then menstruation for about a week, and then soon after that is where our ovulatory phase starts. So that's where our estrogen levels start rising as we approach ovulation. Then we have the ovulatory event. And then after that is called our luteal phase, and that's where progesterone is dominant. So these hormones are used in many areas of the body, not just for reproduction. So when we're missing out on those cyclical hormone levels as they're meant to be, it's going to affect other areas of the body as well. Not so even if you're saying, I don't want to get pregnant, there's still other ways that these hormones are used.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think we talk about that enough. You talked about, shutting down the ovulation. And when you shut down ovulation, obviously to get that ovulation, we're getting that nice spike of progesterone, right? And progesterone is really cancer protective for women. And they
Mhm.
don't talk about the long-term effects of decreasing your overall exposure to progesterone. You're not getting that progesterone spike. And I think that's something that is sort of lost in the conversation when people talk to their, OB about birth control, whether it's the pill, it's a hormonal IUD, is they lose that, obviously, that cycle, which is super important long term.
Yes, exactly. And if you'd like, I could like explain why you get that progesterone spike and why you don't with birth control.
Yes,
Um,
please.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
I think that's important for women because they don't understand, you mentioned obviously the pills giving these low level hormones, but basically, and you'll explain it much better, is they're shutting down the communication between that hypothalamus and the ovary. And again, maybe you could talk more about that and, the long-term effects of that because they don't do that.
Yes. Yeah. So when you look at what's actually happening in a cycle, you have like you have your ovary, and then inside of that you have your egg, and then a follicle that surrounds it. So as you get farther along in the ovulatory phase, that follicle is going to keep growing, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it secretes estrogen. So once you get to peak estrogen levels, that's what stimulates a hormone called LH to be triggered from your brain. And so if you've ever heard of like ovulation or LH test strips, that's what you're detecting. And then about 24 to 36 hours after that LH peak is when ovulation occurs. So after ovulation, that egg leaves the ovary, and that little follicle is left inside of the ovary, and it transforms into the corpus luteum. So it was secreting estrogen, and now it's secreting progesterone. So that is what causes you to get that big progesterone spike after ovulation. And then as over 10 to 14 days or so, that corpus luteum will start dying. And as that's dying, then your progesterone levels are lowering until eventually it's low enough where menstruation starts for the next cycle then.
Right. And that corpus luteum producing the progesterone is getting your body in case there is conception, right? Because that
Exactly. It's exactly because you need that. That's what's keeping you
sustaining.
from
Right.
bleeding. That progesterone is responsible for maintaining that uterine lining so that you're not having any bleeding. So that's another cool thing about FEMM is we assess the luteal phase length. So if we see that it's like a 7-day luteal phase, that's a big indicator that there's low progesterone levels,
Mhm.
and that it would be unlikely that a pregnancy would be able to implant, because there's just not enough time to actually make its way and implant before that shedding starts happening.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And, I just think it's so important for us as women and for us to teach our daughters like about the cycle. And there's just so much negativity around cycles. Like my daughter she just turned 13. She hasn't started her cycle yet, but she's nervous too because she just hears people talking about how awful it is. And I've been trying to like change her mindset about that. But you know, I just hear a lot of women like, I wish I didn't have my cycle, or I'm just want to get rid of my cycle, or, just
Yeah.
all of these things. And I'm like, no, we need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should
Being on,
want that.
yeah.
I think also if there's a lot of cycles are not meant to be terrible. If they are, there's probably an underlying cause going on. Like we're
Yeah.
not meant to be in bed for 3 days, or, can't stand to be around people because we're so angry for a couple of days before, like that.
Yeah.
All that is not normal. So, yeah, it gets a bad rap because a lot of times there are underlying issues making it feel terrible, but it's not meant to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it will be a great time to just maybe discuss like what the FEM method is and what you teach people within that method, and just maybe who it would be good for, to learn more about. I really think it would be good for most women, but
Yes.
in general.
Yeah, so it's extremely valuable for any women, and also tweens and teens. There's a teen fem program, and they just actually came out with a teen men program as well. So that is in some schools. I hope one day it'll be in every school.
Yeah.
But so just to learn, like in the example with your daughter, if she knows kind of exactly what to expect, that can really help to ease
Yeah.
their worry about it. But so the two main factors that the FEMM method uses is cervical mucus and LH testing. So with the LH testing, I talked about how that's just a hormone that's released from the brain soon before ovulation. So that can help to kind of narrow down exactly when you may be ovulating. The other method that is really more primarily used is the cervical mucus method. So when you are in that ovulatory phase where that follicle is releasing large amounts of estrogen, that is going to secrete uh, that estrogen is going to cause the cervix to produce a type of mucus. So when there's more low levels of estrogen, so towards the beginning of the ovulatory phase, it might be like a sensation of moistness. You may notice a little shininess on the toilet paper, or like a little bit of stretch to the mucus. And then as you get closer to ovulation and those estrogen levels are rising higher, the mucus is going to become more watery, really, like more stretchy, more lubricative, like, and by that I mean like a sensation like if you were to wipe up an egg white off the floor, it would be that like slippery kind of sensation. Um, and then stretchiness. So the mucus will be clear, stretchy, and lubricative. That's kind of our what we look for with that really fertile, high estrogen type mucus.
Okay. Yeah.
So are they, so let me just back up. So can you maybe describe how someone would go about, starting this process of, obviously LH strips is just a test strip, so that's pretty easy. They're just measuring the pituitary hormones. But as far as the mucus, so that they could distinguish, okay, right, this is the mucus in the follicular phase when you're getting closer to ovulation, and then what it looks like in luteal phase. Like, what's the process like? Maybe what's first step for people?
So there is a FEMM app, so that is something to at least start tracking. There, I do recommend working with a FEMM practitioner though, a FEMM teacher, just because there's a lot to know, and if I've just through my experience of working with clients, it seems like if they just download the app and kind of try to figure it out on their own, a lot of times then once I meet with them, they're like, oh, I was totally putting this as this. And because there's just it's a lot of information to try to learn on your own, just because there is that distinguishing between like the low level estrogen versus the high level estrogen versus other observations, like pasty mucus, clumpy mucus, all that kind of stuff. So I would recommend finding a FEMM teacher to it's like 3 main educational sessions that kind of build on each other, which covers just an intro session, which goes over a lot of the anatomy, the initial signs that you're looking for. And then we go into our second session, which is a little bit more detailed with like the different phases of the cycle, as well as the LH testing. And then the third session is a family planning session. So that's where we go through whether trying to achieve pregnancy, avoid pregnancy, just different instructions for how people can use this information in regards to fertility.
Which is really helpful because, again, I don't think that is probably taught enough. Obviously in 7th and 8th grade, everybody gets the birds and the bees talk and they give you a little bit of the anatomy, but I don't think for women, right, the majesticness of really how incredible the body is at, like you said, giving you signs along the way. And how do it, and not even only about fertility, but identifying, okay, how is my hormonal health, right? Like I can really look at, am I ovulating? What day am I ovulating, right? Am I
Right.
getting a lot of PMS? That means the luteal phase is really shortened, right? That second half of the cycle. So even if
Right.
it's not just about fertility, I think for younger girls, just learning how to encourage strong hormonal health by reading the body signs.
Exactly. It's no mistake that God created our bodies with this knowledge, even not only for fertility, but speaking about that, like women can only get pregnant for about a week per cycle, and most women don't know that. But then also health-wise, just to know, like if I'm having a short luteal phase, I know even before I'm married or trying to get pregnant, okay, I want to work on this because this is not looking healthy and this might not end well when I get to that stage of life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I was just thinking about how many people might not even track their cycle at all. So that might be at least a good first step. Like I know I use the app Flow. It's free. You just put in the day that you start, honestly. And so you can just see, like, are you consistent? How long is your cycle? You can begin to look at things more. And so that might be a good first step if you don't even track your cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely recommend at least that to have like a baseline, and then starting to pay attention to the times of the cycle where it's like, okay, I notice that I'm having some slippery mucus, or like that's a good thing to just make note of. And
Yeah.
or am I not seeing that at all? Or things like that. I think we often just look at periods because it's the easiest thing, to the most observable sign. But really the ovulation is what we kind of care about the most, like that seeing that healthy mucus to indicate those healthy estrogen levels, because that's what's going to cause a healthy ovulation and then a healthy corpus luteum.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so much to learn. Like I was always taught, like the first half of the cycle is really dependent on the second half of the last cycle and vice versa, right? Is that true that each half of the cycle is dependent on the previous?
I would more so say so your luteal phase is pretty much going to stay consistent. So like if your luteal phase is always 13 days, then that unless you're going through a season of life like pregnancy or breastfeeding or something, but for the most part, that luteal phase is going to stay pretty consistent. Which is really so that first half of the cycle is where it can be more variable. So say normally you ovulate on day 14 every cycle, but you around that time you get the flu, then your body might shut down temporarily and you might not ovulate for a week or two after that. So then once you ovulate, then you still have to have that full luteal phase. So that's a really people will often say like, "Oh, my period always comes on day 28, but this cycle it hasn't." And it's interesting when you're charting because you see, "Oh, well, I just ovulated 2 days ago, so I still have to have my whole luteal phase." So it's not just relying on like the numbers of the cycle, but it's actually seeing what's happening in your body and knowing, "Oh, yeah, I have to ovulate, then I have to have my luteal phase before I get my period again."
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's good to know. And how do you work with people, Leah? Like,
I work with people just virtually on Zoom. So how I do it is I send a video before each session going over the majority of the information just because it's a lot. It's like a 40-minute video before each session. Because trying to present all of that live and take notes on that is just a little overwhelming. So I like a video where people can refer back to it. And then we meet after I send the video and we just go through some charting examples. And then we go through the client's chart as well and, make any corrections necessary, make sure everything's making sense before we then move on to the next session.
and how do you have them? So, see, you see deviations and say the luteal phase. Are they able to make lifestyle changes and things that could, improve those? And I guess I'm asking that because, while a lot of our, clients are probably in their fertility or, that stage of life, I think there's other women that are either just getting started or maybe, past childbearing years that they really, we just want to help them improve the health of their cycle and hormonal signaling.
Yeah. So FEMM has FEMM doctors. So they have a whole protocol that they use. It's called the BHP, or the basic hormonal profile, which is a set of labs that they do. So things like prolactin, 30 minutes apart, doing an insulin and glucose test, also, I believe, every hour for 3 hours. Things like that, which they have a much more narrow range of acceptable amounts. And typically through that, they are able to figure out what the issue is. So a lot of times, it's insulin resistance related. Also, thyroid can be a big thing for cycle issues. So that is typically where I refer people if there's obvious abnormalities with their cycle, or even if they just have a lot of negative symptoms along with their cycle, that's where I refer them to kind of work through the next step.
Great.
I
Yeah.
know, as we're kind of wrapping up, I think this has been super helpful. Just if you're seriously have not ever thought about this, I think it was a really good explanation about like how the cycle works and why it matters to track these things. I know one thing that we didn't really get to talk about a lot is how important blood sugar is in this whole scenario. I know you and I have talked about that. So we have several podcasts on the importance of blood sugar, but it definitely plays into the health of your cycle and this whole conversation. So I know you guys focus a lot on that when you work with clients, right?
Definitely. From the we do some FEMM case studies with the medical providers, and through that, one thing that has stood out to me is they often say heavy bleeding during the cycle is usually related to insulin resistance. So, which you wouldn't think about.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't seem like it would be related, but it seems like insulin resistance is probably the #1 issue causing the majority of the problems that women are presenting with.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
huge.
I believe it for sure. It's that
Yeah.
important. We'll
Yeah.
definitely link some of our previous podcasts on blood sugar if you guys want to tune into those. But really, the cycle is very much a indicator of health, like you were saying at kind of the beginning. And all the things that we do with clients to try and decrease stressors on their body will only improve your cycle. And you really, a lot of times, have to look at it at very holistically. Like, what is stressing out the body? How can we remove some of these stressors? How can we give it what it needs? Because oftentimes, the cycle is one of the last things to come around when your body's trying to heal. But it really does give you a good indication of healing. It might not look the way you want it to if you're really wanting to focus on your cycle health and you're still seeing, PMS symptoms or whatnot. But just knowing more about it will at least help you to understand what's going on and not feel so frustrated, even if you're not trying to conceive, even if it's, past that time for you or not quite that time. So I just love this conversation. I hope it's been helpful. It's been helpful to me. I hope it's been helpful to those listening. Jen, did you want to say something?
No, Leah, thank you so much. You're so knowledgeable. We're excited to really do more with this. And yeah, look forward to more talks about this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I've learned so much from the podcast, and it's an honor to be on myself.
Uh,
Yeah, thank you
we're
so
grateful.
much. And if you want more information on this, we'll have some things in the show notes for you guys to check out. But Leah is going to start serving our clients if they want help in this way. And so just reach out to us and we'll give you more information on what that might look like. Thanks so much, Leah.
Thank you.